I got into the death industry. The place I worked was a little bit unsafe. There was one cremation unit. It wasn't getting as hot as it needed to be to do a cremation. They were like, we tried to put a test case, which is code for a person, in the unit and it didn't work. You have to take them out because it was an incomplete cremation. We were tasked to remove this half-burned old woman out of the cremation unit and figure out how to move her to one of the more functional ones. I found this sort of like sun-rotting piece of plywood out back behind a building, and I used ratchet straps to strap it down onto this cart with the lip hanging over the edge. So if you can imagine, this is the cart with the wheels, and then there's this piece of wood that's sticking out like a human-sized spatula. I pushed it in there, slid it under the woman, and then we got these hooks. They're meant for opening and closing doors, and we sort of hooked them under her rib cage and pulled her up onto the piece of plywood, and then pulled the cart out and put it over into another unit and pushed the whole piece of plywood in, and all of the liquid, all of the marrow, all of the fat, all of the muscle, all of these things burn off and they either turn into ash or they vaporize. Most of what's left afterwards is just a small pile of ash and then any of the metal. So like if somebody had a necklace on or if they had gold fillings, and then the bones, fragments of skull that are skull-shaped and whole leg bones. This contrasts so deeply with what people think when they're gonna get back the ashes of their loved ones. You have to put it into a processor and crush all these bones up to resemble more so what people think ash would look like. So the majority of what you get back is just pure calcium. You could, in theory, grind up the bones and make china out of them or take them as a supplement or whatever. It disassembles the human body in a way to you where you're like, wow, the only like real substance to me is this calcium. Everything else can just be destroyed or evaporated. Or if I were to be cremated in a crematory unit, or I were to die in the wild and be eaten by bacteria and scavengers, it would still be the same thing, that the only thing would be left would be the calcium. The smell of humans being cremated is somewhat familiar. Like chicken, like pork, the only things that make it smell unfamiliar are things like the hair, the clothing, the synthetic fibers in the caskets. Once all of that stuff burns off, which is oftentimes in the earlier stages, when it's just the flesh burning, it isn't really that different to the common meats we know. So I would have uncomfortable experiences, and you leave the cremation to do its thing and run its process and go on your lunch break. And then I would always go to the same market. They would grill chicken outside, walking away from the crematory being like, fresh air. And then I'm getting closer to my lunch and I'm like smelling like I'm walking towards the crematory again. Working there definitely diminished my ability to see the human body as anything more than meat.